Carlos Nelson with the Kansas City Business Association, and tonight we're continuing our series with people that are running for elected office. Specifically tonight, the Kansas City School District. Who do we have here?
My name is Manny Abarca, and I'm running for the 3rd Sub-District for the Kansas City, Missouri School Board.
Hey Manny, tell our audience a little bit about you, who you are.
Sure. So I was born on the Kansas side, raised on the Missouri side. My mother actually was chasing better schools for me, and so I started out in kind of the Catholic parochial schools as I was growing up, some pre-K stuff for them, and then eventually ended up in the Hickman Middle School District, and then finally settled into the Grandview School District. And so, my mother completely passed the Kansas City, Missouri School District because that time there was no accreditation, and so she wanted a better life for me, and she thought the best way to do that was to provide me with the best education she could.
What do you do for a living?
So I work for Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver. I'm his deputy director for Kansas City's district offices.
All right. So you have some experience.
I guess so. I mean, there's some other experience I think help kind of molds me and creates me as a well-rounded candidate. I also serve on a Guadalupe Center's charter school board now and have for the last 2 years. And
what's that like? Tell our audience about some of your accomplishments in life in general, so that they know who you are. And from remember, audience, this is Kansas City Business Association. What makes you different, so that they know, hey, this guy does have the qualifications, the skill set, to navigate.
Sure. Do you mind if I tell a quick story?
Please.
So
you got all the time in the world. This is our network.
That's fair. So I specifically remember a time when I was transitioning from kind of the urban city school mindset, is what I'd call it, and transitioning over to the suburban mindset, right? This kind of assimilation, transition, whatever. I specifically remember a time when my stepdad surprised me, showed up to a school, and I was probably at best a C student throughout my I guess regular K through 12 schooling. I was never stellar in any of the academic programs, but I remember he showed up one day, and I remember I had my feet up on the desk, and I was leaning back, trying to be the cool kid, and he just kind of tapped me on the shoulder, and I was like, oh, hey, good to see you. And he said, you know what, let's go. Let's get out of school. Let's be done with this. And at the time, I was like, oh, cool, I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here. And so he checked me out of school, and he said, what you want to do today? It's probably middle of the day. I said, well, I'm kind of hungry. Let's go get some lunch. He goes, let's go get some steak. And I was like, okay, I'm an inner city kid, and this is in the Hickman Middle School. I was at Dobbs Elementary. And I'm thinking, okay, we can get some steak. Now, my stepdad grew up at Parade Park right here, and so he had similar mindset as my mother, and we kind of connected in that way. And so he said, all right, let's go get some steak. We went downtown to Hereford House.
Boy, y'all eating good.
I know, yeah, that's it. And he said, what do you want to get? Whatever you want. Get whatever you want. And I said, okay. And, I thought having a strawberry daiquiri was cool at the time. I got a strawberry daiquiri, and I was like, man, this is great. This is, I'm leaning on my table. I'm not really performing so well in school. I'm getting kind of the treatment here. And he goes, okay, what do you want to do next? We finish up our little steak. And he goes, well, what do you want to do? Let's go. And I said, well, let's go get some toys, man. I said, I think I'm in 3rd, 4th grade. And he goes, all right, let's go to Toys R Us. He said, now pick out whatever you want. And I said, okay, something's weird about this, but okay, let's get whatever. Let's go. I pick out a few things, and we leave. He goes, no, let's go ride some horses. And I'm like, horses? I never messed with a horse. I said, all right, I'll try something out. We went and spent a couple hours riding horses. And then we all wrapped up the day. And he goes, all right, what'd you think? And I said, oh, this was cool. This was great. This is way better than being in school. And he goes, well, this is what happens when you finish school. Is you get to do whatever you want. You get to choose whatever you want to eat during your days. You get to go and do and buy whatever you want. But what you're doing right now is you're preparing yourself to serve fries. And there ain't nothing wrong with that, but is that what you want to do? And I thought, oh man, he was teaching me a lesson.
That's interesting. My 17-year-old that I have right now, she's spoiled rotten, and it's like, do you understand that all this stuff costs money?
Right.
Do you know, I was on her about playing a horn yesterday. I'm like, you got to play every single day for at least a half an hour. And on the weekends, when you have the time, you're going to play an hour.
Right.
You want to run track? I got to, I'm saying, I've got to pick you up now at 6:30 every day. Right. That's inconveniencing me. But I want you to build your skill set.
Right.
Because the more skill set that you have, you're competing globally.
Absolutely.
This big scandal with the stars, getting their kids in school, and I'm like, you're going to be able to go to Harvard, Yale, or wherever you want to go because you're going to have the academics. Right. And she is academically 99 on her Spanish, 99 on her algebra, what have you, 10th grade. But they have to understand that was a clear message to you.
Yeah, and that was when the light switch changed for me personally about academics and education. I would eventually go and in Grandview, actually, I would join, I guess, whatever the advanced classes were, and that was a struggle. I mean, I specifically, again, remember a teacher going, "No, you're not going to make it," and that being another moment where it pushed me forward.
Tell me this: how did you feel? Because with her, she was like a C student, C minus. Nice looking girl, thinking looks are going to do the trick. But now she's at the top of the grade, and I'm like, how do you feel about yourself? How did you feel about yourself as you start achieving?
Sure, it was freedom. I mean, it's what ultimately opened doors for me that would have never happened before, and instilled in me that the value of education is far greater than any one other thing. And that's the only way to kind of uplift ourselves is through our own investment in ourselves. And so, I mean, that's how I felt afterwards when things changed.
But let me say this. We talked off camera about media and influence. And, and that the influence that our kids are getting has you thinking in a certain way. And that's the obligation of you parents out there to show your kids everything that you see out here is not like it is, but these are the important things that you need to be paying attention. And if you're not paying attention, you can't do nothing.
Sure, parents and general family, right? I mean, you know, I had aunts, uncles, I had strangers who were friends of my family who helped build me who I am today. And so, I mean, I think it's the responsibility of all of us, right? So,
all right, getting back, we said that story, and as I said, we have all the time in the world because, audience, you should know who you're voting for. You should know what they stand for. You should know their background because who's on this school board is going to affect your kids and possibly your grandkids on the policies that are being implemented, especially the African American community, because this board has been shrunk down from 9 to 7, and we'll talk about that. But I want to go to your accomplishments.
Sure. So it was through that story that I think it helped really trigger me to focus on education. So graduated from the University of Central Missouri with a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science. Stayed there, got a Master's of Science from them, and actually I just got accepted to the Mizzou program for an educational doctorate program.
And what's that about? Tell our audience.
So I mean, you know, when I first joined the school board, the charter school board, I remember a mentor of mine who built the Guadalupe Center school system, or was part of that process. I told him, I said, man, I'm not an educator. That's not what I went to school for. That's not background I have. I feel uncomfortable leading a school district that I've never been a teacher. It's not my thing. He goes, Manny, you've been to school. You've experienced good. You've experienced bad. You have that understanding of your personal experience. You understand governing. You understand what should be happening that's not. He said, that's perfect. That's what we want.
That's skill set.
That's right. And I said, well, if that's the case, I said, then I'll do it. Because I think the belief that you have in me has empowered me to step up to the plate and participate. And I think the same thing is true of this school district, right? You know, as John Fierro was the person who I'm preceding, he came to me and said, hey, I'm departing the board. Not only do we need representation for our community, but also you have a skill set that others, that isn't out there. Would you step up to the plate? And I said, absolutely, I'd be happy to. And I think it's through those experiences and some of the stuff that I've done in the neighborhood associations, the Northeast Chamber of Commerce, my Indian Mountain Neighborhood Association. So I I did not grow up in the Northeast.
Right.
I grew up mostly on the west side and straggled that state line. And so I was in a diverse community when I was born and raised for the early years of my childhood. And then I was raised in the suburban side. So I've got an interesting dichotomy and balance there. But so when I had the final choice to decide where I wanted to live once I graduated, I was making decent enough money to choose. I chose the Northeast. Because
I lived over there by Northeast High School, right across from the park.
Okay, Bud Park.
Yeah, and you know that on Independence, that bakery, the Mexican. For 2 years, hold it. The one if you're going west on Independence Avenue, past the Sonics, and then it's on the right hand side.
Yeah,
All right. This is 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer. Every time I'm coming home, I'm like, why are all these people, before he remodeled, standing out there? What are they selling?
Right.
I must have gained 50 pounds. No, literally. I was stopping there every day, getting a bag of donuts and cream things and what have you.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reason why I moved to that community, right? Is because I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be in the community. I wanted tacos at 3 in the morning.
Right.
I wanted that cultural experience. I didn't want to live in a cookie cutter box downtown. No offense to anybody who does that.
Right.
I just wanted something different.
Right.
And so I moved over there. And
I applaud you for that.
Well, thank you. It's to be with the community. I don't want to be the person who lives in Grandview, talks about changing things, and you know.
And that's hold it. Every time I have this conversation, like, I don't know whether you knew Alex Ellison. He was in school. Anyway, they stay right here on Benton and off of 27th, and there's 3 big mansions right there, and he stays in one. And him and Alice, they chose to move in their community.
Right.
And Bernard Powell said, you have a ghetto gold mine. The choice is yours.
True.
You moving way out there when you should be moving in your community and improving your community,
right.
And that's
Absolutely.
what you've done.
That's what I try to do.
And that's and that's another reason why you need to know who you're voting for and know what their values are.
Sure. From my office, I can see James Elementary, and that's one of the schools that I currently represent right now. And so I love that fact. I can hear the kids playing.
Like I told you, you don't know a lot about me. James Elementary. Don Maxwell's wife was the what was she? She was over that school.
The principal? Or?
Yeah, she was the principal. Lost for words, audience. I started the Boy Scout program in the Kansas City School District.
Yeah.
And James Elementary in Missouri is where I started it. And had my godfather, Carl DiCapo, sat on the national board. Sure. And he had them pay for all of the kids in the public schools uniforms and everything that we did free.
Yeah.
And so my tie with that James, what's going on over there now?
There's some great stuff happening over there. So James is performing at a level that it hadn't previously been performing academically. And so now we need to refocus that, though, and make sure that we're also investing in the infrastructure of James, because they have some challenges there, as do most of our schools in terms of infrastructure. But we need to reinvest in these places in our community.
Talking about investment, now I'm really going to go rapid.
Oh, let's do it.
All right. How do you feel that the corporate community here in Kansas City has paid their fair share, has paid attention to the needs of the urban core, the northeast side, and how can one feel that they can have a healthy Kansas City and have all of this blight and so forth,
sure.
Lack of resources? What's your talk to?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of corporations in general, when you look at the big business models, they don't work in our communities. Our communities are driven by the small businesses like Elvira's that are there on Independence Avenue that have created something of their own out of necessity, realistically.
Right.
And so you've seen, in fact, disinvestment from those communities, which caused some collapses. And then also create some of this blight that we have, right? A lot of these communities were built. The workforce housing was built for the corporation that was there. Well, when the corporation left, then the workforce didn't have any place to go, and you lacked the connectivity that was required for elsewhere, right? When you move a corporation to Liberty and your workforce housing is in the Northeast, what are you going to do? I mean, there's some issues there. And so, you know, I'm not going to say that it would take corporations to come back in our communities to change that. I think we're changing it ourselves. You're seeing the development of new businesses happening in the shells of these old corporations.
All right, but this is where I'm at on that. I represent basically predominantly African American community. There has not been any really investment in our community, even though they put a Sunfresh or they'll do this or that. But that's a city investment.
Right.
That is not a private investment.
Right.
But the corporate community in general, just like we had off camera and I was saying, you have Highland Dairy in the community, and I don't know whether the school district has a contract with Highland or this other dairy company. But all right, that's a predominantly black district. What are you doing? What give back are you giving to the community?
Sure, the community benefit.
Right? Yeah.
No, I mean, so that is an element,
and that's where I see elected officials, because we're driven by economics.
Sure.
If you're not doing the right thing, then you need to be penalized.
Sure.
To me, it's almost like
and not incentivized.
Yeah, right. And it's almost like the green issue. Anyone that's got a brain, and I don't care if they can say I'm biased, know that the planet's heating up, know that things are not right. And it's scientifically, what empirical scientific data show the reasons for this. But yet, the people in power keep doing what they want to do. And it's up to you you're running unopposed.
Yeah. Sadly.
That shows you there's a whole lot of apathy. Because it's like you can't fight City Hall.
Sure. Well, let's talk about that for a second.
Right.
So the unopposed thing. This is an interesting place to be in, right? I'm not even going to be on the ballot. So even if you decided that you did not like me and did not want to support me, you couldn't even write in Carlos. You couldn't do it. And that is a failure of our democratic process. And so I would rather have an opponent so that people can have a choice. That's true democracy.
Well, we talked about that choice thing.
Sure. Well, and I think an element of this, though, is the process itself. So the process of, just to make sure that everyone understands, you have roughly 28 days to collect 250 or 500 signatures. Now, mind you, this 28 days starts after Thanksgiving. So what we're talking about is we have all these holidays and the fact that we live in the state of Missouri and that there's this thing called winter. And you have
and it was harsh this year.
Yeah, it was very harsh. And you have that small amount of time to get your required signatures to qualify for the ballot. That doesn't encourage participation.
Well, in my community, I learned that the whole board had to flip, and that wasn't just here. It was a nationwide or whatever.
State.
It was statewide, and that no one virtually knew what that meant. That I learned on a Thursday. That following Tuesday was the last day that you could apply to register to run. And I called a couple of influential African Americans, and they knew nothing about it. They knew that the election was coming, but they didn't know anything about the downsides. Yeah. All right. So what does that say about leadership? And what does that say about how the Kansas City School District really connected to the public?
Sure.
Would that be, and especially the African American community, would that be in a primarily African American district?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of, and it's actually a majority-minority district when you combine.
When I say African American,
But I mean, the reality is 28% are Latino students as well.
Right.
And so when you combine the two communities, that is the majority. And so there is a greater need to connect in those ways. And so absolutely, I mean, I went to the redistricting meetings. I think there were 2 or 3 that happened and occurred in different communities. And there was roughly 5 to 10 people at each one. And what we're talking about is the redefinition of boundaries.
Well, how many kids are in the district?
It's about 13,000 kids.
So you have a handful of people that have vested interests that are making the decision for a very diverse district, and I just cringe at what's going to happen, especially in light of the charter schools, especially in light of the shrinking population and availability of kids. What's really going to happen with the district?
So I think all of what we just talked about revolves back to personal choice in some way or another. Individual action, personal choice. You can control your ability to move outside the district and not participate. Now, granted, I understand that there are some certain dynamics in certain parts of the district that you may consider that as the viable option. I don't agree with it, but that may be your choice. Same thing with the whole climate change thing, right? You know, although maybe our leaders aren't as effective as we want them to be, you can make individual life choices to curb your impact individually. So we have to start doing that and accept that responsibility, because there are those who take on unpaid 40-hour at least jobs to try and solve this, but I don't have all the answers. And so one of the things that I look forward to doing is engaging with parents, engaging with community.
Do you have a specific platform that you feel like you say
I got a 3-tenant platform?
All right, tell them what that is.
Sure. So my goal is to focus on 3 main things in the district: community, equity, and progress. And in terms of community, my goal is to engage more than the current parents of our children. Because I believe, as a person who doesn't have a child in the district, that it requires the same amount of people external from the district to ensure that our district will be successful in many ways. And so if the only people we're engaging are parents of the children that we're teaching, we're missing out on a larger population. How are we ever going to convince a parent of a charter school then that we're just as good or better?
Better, right.
Because we've never tried to engage them, right? We're only talking to the people that we serve. So we need to be engaging these external forces and bring them into our schools more than just to engage them at a classroom level, at an education level, right? Imagine if we had, like in my community, Northeast is 30,000 people. We do not have a central community center in our community. That was 30,000 people.
Hey, let me say this. I asked you about that, but I was going to forgot to ask you about sports. And I'm always because talking about the inequity that suburban schools, they have 3-4 gyms.
Absolutely.
To train, and urban core,
anytime,
they have 1 gym, and the cheerleading team, the basketball team, the football team, and all the other ballet, whatever, they all have that one space. And how can that be equal?
Sure. Well, this is the community part. This is the other element in terms of direct engagement, like we talked about, communicating the good and the bad with our community, internal and external. There has to be a level of inclusion for community members. So my idea and concept, and we've got to work on the funding and all of that, but I think through partnership, this is possible.
That's excellent. The partnership, building that coalition.
We can turn our schools into these community centers, into these small microcosm community centers, right? Because as I start to think about, and I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, man, I'd love to see some local community theater. Not that Kaufman isn't great, not that everyone else is great. I don't want to leave my neighborhood to go see a good show. And I was thinking, man, but we don't even have a theater.
And the price of it.
Well, yeah, that too. I was thinking, man, we don't have a theater. And I was like, wait a minute. I got 5 schools in the Northeast, and they all got theaters in them. Why don't we have...
Why aren't we developing our talent?
Yeah. And then I started to think about it, and I said, man, wait a minute. I can name 3 different people right now. One designs costumes for local theaters. One has the lighting and sound for all the theaters. And all these people are right here in our community. Why can't we bring these people together?
That's what they have out at Hickman Mills at Ruskin. What's the plant? The plant eats.
Oh yeah. Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, all right. We went out there. This is like 4 or 5 years ago, and we interviewed all of the people that were in the play.
Right.
And they made the costumes right there at the school.
Yeah.
They did everything right there at the school, and that's really excellent. Like I told you when I started the scouting program, those are the type of things our kids help build their skill set, but help build their confidence, and it doesn't cost anything. You have the facility right there. What are you doing?
We're paying the bills anyways. The lights, we already pay the light bill. We already pay the water bill. We already carry the insurance. Why aren't we creating more of an opportunity there? In a community that has no community center, man, if I was a 31-year-old who has no kids and I wanted to play basketball inside during the winter, I got no place to go over there. I got to go to a different community to have that.
But let me say this. This is what is happening across the board, that the school systems and the people that own the facilities, it's really prohibited from the community really using the facilities, because you have to go through so much red tape. Like with the Kansas City School District, you use one of them facilities, you got to have security, you got to have insurance, you got to have, so who can do anything privately? Once upon a time, I used to do camps over at Penn Valley. It was like $75 an hour. I could do a 3-day camp from 9 o'clock to 3 or 4 o'clock. Kansas City School District participated. This is in the summertime. They bought the lunches over there for the kids. Mr. Gates catered for the coaches, and it was all free. But you can't do that now with how everything is.
We could if we wanted to.
Oh yeah, if we wanted to, and we
have to figure that out.
Hold it, and that's again why we're this full-throated interview, to show our community. Once again, you got to know who you're voting for and what their agenda is, and out of their own mouth, this is what I want to do. And that's why we're having this conversation.
Absolutely. So let's take that a step further, right? So this is 3 prongs: community, equity, progress. So the equity component, that has 2 different levels here. Equity being that we must provide to every single student the access and an ability to be as successful as their peers, wherever they are in that process, right? I mean, we can't just say, hey, Carlos, I'm gonna give you $5 when you don't have any dollars, and I'm over here with $20 and you gave me $5. That doesn't work. We have to create the same balanced approach to provide everyone at
and
where
the resources.
They're at. So that needs to happen for our kids.
But that's where I was talking about the corporate community. And what I said about the scouts. Our kids could not afford those uniforms, the badges, and I would take them camping once a month. But the scouts picked the bill up. And the things that you're talking about that have value, if the corporate community puts something aside to help those type projects.
Or if their space is to provide that resource for our community, let's educate some kids to take that on later, right? I mean, so that's another element. You bring up a very good point. It's more than just a classroom setting, making sure every kid has a computer or something about that, or each school has the same computer, right? Why don't we talk about the social services that are missing in some of these communities and bring those to the table as well? And maybe those are some of the corporate partners we need to create relationships with, right? I mean, so that or strengthen those relationships.
And have that, and have the dialogue. And as we were saying about, how important do you think companies like Cascade? I was showing you a few things that you weren't aware of. How do you see us fitting in to that landscape and trying to help be at the vanguard of change on the digital plane? And how important is that with us trying to be one of the smart cities, with the Kansas City School District and all districts paying more attention to the digital plane? And if you've been paying attention, now they're having as a major video gaming in college and what have you. And that just is showing you everything is digitized. How important do you think a company like Cascade Media plays in the future of Kansas City?
I think you can define the field of the next generation. Personally, I mean, I envision the type of partnership similar to you teaching a class on your field itself and inspiring the next generation of leaders here. And that's not, hey, come volunteer with me. That can be reciprocated in some ways. But ultimately, if you're the best in the business, you should be teaching the next generation to be the better version of you. Because we don't know.
And you have to learn by example.
Absolutely.
Let me say this, and I've said this privately, and I won't. One of your people that's in the administration at the Kansas City School District, long time, 30 years, high up, maybe. He used to work for me when I had my construction company back in the early 90s and 80s. And about 10 years ago, we're we're at a basketball game or something, and he said, "Hey, Mr. Nelson, you know, when I used to work for you in the summertime, I had never seen a black man pay a white man in my life." Hold on, he was a high school kid then. That floored me.
Sure.
To not understand, that was an everyday thing with me,
right.
But how he perceived that as a young person.
Sure.
And so having role models, real role models, not the advertisement with the black face or the Hispanic face, on there and saying this or that, and you don't see it in actual reality.
Sure.
You know, and what you see, and hopefully you'll be a different type of leader that don't stand for the window dressing. If we're supposed to be working for our community, and I talk about the young girls, Ocasio and them, use your position, hopefully, to put some teeth into some policies that service our community, and not just the African American or the Hispanic community. As I say, if we're sick, the whole community cannot be well.
Absolutely. The school district, I think, for a long time, has been the one thing that has slowed the growth of our city as a whole. And I think that's true because you're starting to see the Chamber of Commerce playing into this. You're starting to see the mayor's office creating a director of education. People are seeing the systemic problem with their city is that we need to fix the education system.
Let me tell you this. This was by a member that's running for city council we was having.
Sure.
And I never looked at it like this. They said if the Kansas City School District had been working right, there wouldn't have been no Johnson County School District.
Right. Correct. People would have stayed here.
And so the people with the money...
That's a good point.
But hold on, I had never even envisioned that.
Or charter schools wouldn't have existed.
Yeah, right. And so, again, if you think that public schools are a good thing, you need to pay attention. And in closing, what do you have to say to our audience?
I think it's imperative that no matter whether you have a child in the district or not, you're engaged with the district. You're figuring out a way to be a part of your community neighborhood schools. You're figuring out a way to support the neighbors on your block who are the children of tomorrow, our leaders of tomorrow. We got to be supportive as a city. And you could love your charter schools, but your public schools are here to serve you as best we can. And we want to be a part of your community as well.
Excellent. And as we always say in closing, remember, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good night.
This program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.